What's up, guys? How are you doing? I hope you're doing really good. I have just discovered something absolutely fantastic. So I went to go open up another jar of pure fucking swole. And unfortunately, the dipshits that made this made the same mistake that everyone else does, where they take the scoop and they put it in the jar and then they put the protein powder in, which might seem fine, except that it means that when you go to open this thing, there is no scoop, and you basically have to dig through Mount Everest in order to actually find the scoop that's at the end of the rainbow, at the bottom of the protein jar, and that's a problem. And like this is just a common thing. It's basically industry standard that this is how these come. So most of the time, people end up, like I said, just digging to the very bottom of this thing, using their hands or a fork like an absolute Neanderthal. But I'm here to tell you guys that the future is now. I have the next gen of getting scoops out of jars of protein. It's a very niche industry, but I'm pushing the frontier on it, all right? And you guys get to be part of this. So all you have to do is go grab a concrete vibrator. This is actually a vibrator I have used as a concrete vibrator before. I bought it for like $60 off of Adam and Eve. It's way cheaper than most concrete vibrators, granted that you're not gonna like do an entire sidewalk with it, but if you just need a bucket, it works great, all right? So stop it. I know what you're gonna say, stop it, it's a concrete vibrator. Anyways, all we're gonna do is turn this thing on to the highest setting and just go boop on the side, and it's going to turn the protein powder into a low temperature fluidized bed, and because of buoyancy and other physics bullshit, the scoop is just going to rise to the top. We're just going to bring it home. Give it a nice little nudge, call it home, and it'll come right to us, all right? So let's take a look at this. Okay, so like I said, we turn it on and crank it up to max, and it doesn't matter like where around the jar you put it, you just want it to be about halfway up to where the protein is. And as soon as it touches the protein, or as soon as it goes on the jar, it ends up fluidizing the entire bed. So this actually is behaving more like a liquid now. It's a low temperature liquid because there's very few interactions, but pretty soon here we should get the scoop just floats right up to the top. There it is, look at that! Look at that, isn't that so cool? Just floats right up to the top. Oh, that's so awesome. Anyways, that was a lot of fun, guys. I found that trick a few days ago. I was actually trying to leave my house early so I could work out and hit the gym before I got to work. But as soon as I found that, I probably spent about an hour like reburying the scoop and trying to find the best way to actually get it to work. And I was just ecstatic. I've tried to make that happen a few times, like pretty much for the past, I don't know, 6 to 8 months. Every time I get a new jar of protein powder, I like tried to make it happen, and this was the first time I've successfully been able to make that work. And I just wanted to take a minute and talk about sort of the practical applications of both concrete vibrators and fluidized beds, and kind of see if I could explain why I thought that this would happen before I actually made it happen. As funny as this whole video is. So yeah, concrete vibrators are pretty much used whenever you pour concrete. There's generally not much of another use for them. That's specifically what they're designed for. And the whole premise is that when you pour concrete, you will inevitably end up with air bubbles in the liquid concrete. And that's generally not a huge deal, but the two problems that you'll end up running into is that the concrete is just structurally weaker when it's got air bubbles in it. Like, nothing is as solid as a brick, like a solid brick of concrete. And so if you have air bubbles in it, it kind of compromises the structural integrity a little bit. And then the second issue is that concrete and air expand and contract at different rates as the temperature changes. So especially if you're gonna have anything that's outside or subjected to extreme temperatures, having air bubbles dissolved in the concrete can be absolutely detrimental to the physical integrity of the concrete. And so you use a vibrator to kind of shake the whole thing up and get the concrete moving a little bit, and the air bubbles kind of just come right to the surface. It's really pretty fascinating. So that's the first thing done, pretty easy. But fluidized beds are a little bit more interesting. They typically work very differently. You typically have like a bed of something, and then you can run air under it and let it up in different like places, and it stirs the entire mass up as it moves. And the three main applications that I know of for it are usually like moving grains or other powders around, and it's really pretty useful for that because it gets the grain to move a whole lot better, and it just kind of flows because, again, it's kind of becoming a virtual liquid. And the other really cool thing about that is as soon as you don't want it to move anymore, once you get it where it's supposed to be, you just stop agitating it, and now it's a powder. It'll blow away if there's air currents, but otherwise it's just gonna sit there, which is pretty cool. The second thing is like powder coating and stuff like that really heavily uses this stuff. And it's kind of related to the third thing, which is the more general concept of just kind of like chemical applications and chemical processing. Because again, chemical reactions work a whole lot better whenever you actually have things that are moving and they have more surface area, they have more energy to react, and it just really helps the whole thing along. So if you have powders that you're trying to work with, especially if you're trying to mix two powders up, works really well for that kind of stuff. That being said, I called what we did a low temperature fluidized bed, and it's not low temperature in the sense that I like just pulled the protein powder out of the freezer or anything. It's low temperature in that, like, if you look at a liquid under a microscope, and it's hot, all of the small little particles are bouncing around, and it's got a lot of Brownian motion, and there's just a whole lot of entropy in the system. And if you look at a colder liquid under a microscope, there's a whole lot less of that. Things are a lot more static and rigid, and there's definitely some degrees of freedom that you still don't have in solids, but there's not a lot of random motion. And it's not a perfect analogy, but it is kind of analogous to what we built versus the regular fluidized beds, because again, the normal fluidized beds, you pump air through them, and you can find videos where YouTubers have built like fluidized beds of sand, and they literally take like rubber duckies and put them on the surface, and you can push them around and things sink to the bottom and float up, and it's like really pretty quick. Whereas what we built, it took about a minute, maybe a minute and a half for the protein scoop to even come to the top. And other than that, like, it was flowing around a little bit, but it doesn't have just the entropy that most of those systems have. But again, it still behaves in a manner similarly to a liquid. I don't know. I just find this stuff absolutely fascinating. The fact that, like, normally you have to get the conditions absolutely right. You're using like high pressurized air to move all of these particles around and mix everything up. And we just took a concrete vibrator that isn't really even a concrete vibrator and managed to simulate that process, but on a can of protein so that I could get the scoop out of the bottom without getting my hands dirty. I'm just at a loss for words, guys. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this. Feel free to have a look at the other stuff that I've got here. It's probably not quite as entertaining as this, but I'm sure there will be more stuff like this at some point. And as always, I would absolutely love to catch you guys on Twitch. Links in the description. Yeah, hope you guys have a good day.